Hello everyone, I'm Gina Taylor from West Virginia University Extension, and I've been talking to you about safe canning. So today I'm going to talk to you about how to pressure can foods. Pressure canning is very important because it's the only way that you can fight bacteria called Clostridium botulinum, which is known to cause botulism. And we don't want that. And in order to prevent that, we can low acid foods in a pressure canner just like this, because this pressure canner can get up to 240 degrees, which is much higher than the boiling point of water. All right, so first we're going to be sure that our canner is thoroughly cleaned and in working order. So check, we're ready to go with that. Next, we're going to check our jars to make sure that there are no nicks or cracks or sharp edges. So this one's good to go. Then we're going to wash and rinse our jars. We're going to wash them in warm soapy water. And our lids and bands, we're going to wash those as well. And then we're going to follow the manufacturer's directions, because some of the newer lids, you don't have to heat them up. They're called SureTight. And so make sure that you're checking that before you start canning, so that you don't put them in hot water if you don't need to, because that will actually cause the seal to fail. So we want to make sure that we're getting the best out of our canning experience. Next, we're going to select high quality fresh food, and you're going to want to sort your food according to size, and then clean it thoroughly, and then prepare the food according to whatever the canning recipe is that you're using. And then you want to pour hot water in your jars and just set them aside until you need them. Fill your jars with food and liquid to the recommended height. Vegetables and meats require 1 inch of headspace because they're going to expand during the canning process. So you want to make sure you leave enough room to make sure that happens. This is a really handy tool that will show you exactly what headspace you're using. This first nick is for 1 inch. So you just put that right inside your jar, and you don't want to fill beyond that. Fruits need a 1/2 inch headspace, which is another notch. You just set that right on the edge, and there you have a 1/2 inch headspace. And then you can also use this tool to work out the bubbles that are in your jar. Just move it around the edge a little bit, kind of move it up and down, and it'll get those bubbles to come to the surface, and then you won't have them in your jar. Okay, so once you've filled your jars, we're going to take a clean damp cloth, and we're going to wipe the edges of our jars just like this to make sure that there's nothing that's going to prevent that jar from sealing. And once we've done that, we just place the flat part of the lid on top of the jar, and then we're going to put the ring on, but we're only going to tighten this ring what they call finger tight. Okay, so we're just going to use the tips of our fingers with our hand kind of up away from the jar. And the reason for this is because if you over tighten the lids on your jars, a couple things can happen. You can lose liquid, and you can also have seal failure. And you know, you've spent a lot of time and money and effort making your canned foods, and you don't want to have jars that don't seal. So make sure finger tight, okay? And then we're going to put 3 quarts of boiling water into this canner. This canner in particular has a little nick on the inside that shows you exactly where to fill the water to. It's about 2 inches, but that's going to vary according to the type and the model that you have. And then we're going to make sure that we can see through our vent pipe. We're going to hold up our lid, and we're going to look through that and make sure that we can see light through it. So we're good to go on that. We put our jars in, and then we're going to put our lid on the top, and we're going to close it, lock it down according to whatever mechanism you have. And then when the water begins to boil inside the canner, we're going to do a process called venting. The vent is right here on the top, and you'll start to see steam coming out of the vent when the water is at a good solid rolling boil. What you want to wait for is for that to be a pretty big funnel. And when we start to see that big funnel come out, then we're going to set a timer for 10 minutes. The venting process is very important because it keeps that vent free from obstructions. And you know, if your vent is really clogged up, then you're going to have a big problem as far as your pressure building up too high. And we don't want that because A, it can overprocess your food, and B, it could possibly cause your jars to break if the pressure is way too high. Okay, next we're going to place our regulator. After the 10 minutes has elapsed, we're going to put our regulator on the top, just like that. And then we're going to turn up the heat on the burner until this starts rocking. Now this is something that's a little tricky. You'll have to consult your manufacturer's book about the canner. And if you have a very old canner, you can actually still get those books online. You can either download them or print them so you can have them handy for when you're doing your canning process. But the reason I say that is because in this particular case, it says a gentle rocking motion, which is about 3 to 4 times per minute. So, you know, you don't want it going like a freight train. If it's going like a freight train, then you know that the pressure is way too high. And if it's not rocking at all, it's obviously too low. A lot of people prefer a pressure gauge instead of this regulator because the gauge tells you exactly what the pressure is. I'm rather fond of this one with the regulator, and so that's the one that I typically use. So once you've got your thing moving here, you can then turn the pressure down until it, turn the heat down until it starts rocking at the pace that your manufacturer recommends. All right, and once you get to that point, you can start your timer for whatever the time is for your particular recipe and just let it go. And when you come back and your timer goes off, what you're going to do is you're going to turn the burner off, and then you're going to remove the canner from that heat source. And you're going to let it pressure all the way down on its own. You don't take this off, you don't take the lid off, and you certainly don't douse it in cold water. I know that that sometimes can be a common practice, but you can really have a lot of problems. For one thing, allowing it to pressure down on its own, that time is actually part of the canning process. So you might have underprocessed foods if you cool it down too quickly or depressurize it too quickly. The other thing that can happen is if, say for example, you choose to pour cold water on it, you might end up deforming the lid, and so the lid won't come off, or you might cause a big lump on the bottom so your canner doesn't sit straight anymore. And you should never use a canner that has been ruined like that. It's not safe. And so I recommend that you let it go ahead and pressure and cool all the way down. And then once it's down to 0, you can kind of tilt this to the side and make sure no steam is coming out. That's how you'll know on this type. And on the dial gauge, you'll know when it gets to 0. So you just take this back off again, and then you let it sit for 10 more minutes. And then once you're to the point that you're ready to take off the lid, you're going to take off the lid facing away from you to prevent the steam from hitting you in the face and possibly burning you. Okay, so once our processing is finished and our lid is off the canner, we're going to put out a cloth on our countertop or a board, and you're going to set your jars on it. So we're going to take our jars out, probably not with our hands, but once they're cooled off, you need to let them sit for 24 hours. And don't touch them, don't move them, and please, whatever you do, don't push this button, because you will not know which jars are properly sealed and which ones are not. So after 24 hours, then you can test the seal. You can push down and make sure that it's sealed down. Remove the bands for storage. Wipe your jars off, and then label them with the product and the date. This is very important. You should not eat canned foods that have been canned for longer than a year, and so you need to make sure on the top, just take a permanent marker and write green beans 2022. That way you'll make sure that everything you're eating is safe and everything you're feeding your family is safe. Thanks for watching. Like and follow for more safe canning information, and happy canning.